I'm going to talk with you guys today about JHAs. So, a JHA is a job hazard analysis. So, basically, it's a step by step guideline on how to do a certain procedure. So, I'll show you how not only to find a list of all the JHAs we have, but also how to read it and understand what it's talking about. So on the tablets that everybody has, you will locate where your Dropbox is, open your Dropbox, and you'll have a list of folders. It'll look a bit different than this one. You won't have as many folders, but you'll scroll down until you find Marksman HSE print version. So you'll open this, and here you have a list of your different JHAs. So we'll see JHA for spraying, JHA for mechanical, JHA for rail, and JHA for shop. So if you're out on a lease and you're doing some weed whacking, that would fall under JHA mechanical. So you would open that up to find the appropriate JHA for your task. But for most of what you'll be doing during the summer is you'll be spraying on oil leases. So if you need to find a JHA to see how to do a certain task, you'll open up JHA spraying. So under this folder, we have all of our different JHAs for spraying. So we have a JHA for how to properly load water, a JHA for if you're boom buster spraying. So as an example, we'll open up the JHA for hand spraying herbicide for 2020. And this is what your JHA will look like. So starting at the top here, it'll tell you the date the JHA was created, the job description, so hand spraying herbicides, what is related to it, so herbicide application, which is what you'll be doing, and the occurrence rating is daily frequently, so that's how often you'll be performing this task. So hand spraying herbicides, you'll be doing that on a day-to-day basis. If we scroll down to the second page, we'll see tools and equipment required. So in order to spray herbicides, you need your spray truck. You need to have your spill kit in the back, a general tool kit. You need your tablet to complete your work tickets once you are done spraying your site. You need a water pump. You need hose clamps in case you break a hose clamp and need to replace it. We have a list of the personal protective equipment, or PPE, that is required. So when you're spraying herbicides, you'll need safety glasses, hard hat, hearing protection, steel-toed rubber boots, flame-resistant coveralls. It says half mask with P100 OV. For most of the herbicides that we use, you will not be needing this. If you ever do need to wear a half mask, your manager or your supervisor will notify you and provide you with the appropriate equipment. However, most of the herbicides that we use now are very user friendly and don't require a half mask on the label. Administrative controls, competency sign off for job being performed. So these will be handed out at the very beginning of the year. So when everybody is in class, we will give you a package that is titled competency sign off, and your managers will sign off on it throughout the year as you learn different tasks. So first week when you're out in the field working and you're learning how to fill your tank with water, or you're learning how to hand spray herbicides, whatever the task might be, your manager or supervisor will sign off on your competency form saying that you have been shown how to complete the task and you have demonstrated that you can do it in a safe and effective manner. If we scroll down to the next page, permits required. What permits do you require? Work authorization permit. So depending on the field that you're in, you might need a permit to work in the field during the day. So an example might be for CNRL, we require a hazard assessment to work on their oil leases out in the field. They will come into the class and show everybody kind of more in depth what it is that you have to be safe about or worry about out in their field. And then they will sign off on their own form saying that they have shown you and talked to you about their oil leases and kind of what hazards to look out for. Another example might be Husky. They have a form as well, kind of a hazard assessment that we'll go through with you guys. So depending on the company, you might need a different permit. This just tells you who developed the JHA, who revised it, what date it was revised. So now we get down to the main purpose of the JHA, which is giving you guys a step-by-step of each task you'll be performing and how to perform it. So task number 1, spraying plan. So some of the hazards you have are miscommunication and psychosocial hazards. And then it kind of gives you a rundown of what the hazard rating would be for that hazard. So physical harm, environmental harm, financial loss, the probability of it happening, and then the total hazard score. So these are on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being more dangerous, 1 being not as dangerous or as likely. So miscommunication, the physical harm, it's a 1. Environmental harm would be higher, so a 4. And now we have the steps involved in the task. So the steps involved in the task spraying plan include: determine the area you will be using the hand spraying equipment. Before getting out of the truck, make a spraying plan. Determine the PPE requirement for the herbicide application. Who's going to spray what area? Who's going to drive? What technique will you use? Who's going to do the administration, so the paperwork afterwards? Determine the route you're going to walk around the lease for spraying. So this is more so all the kind of planning that you're going to do before you actually start spraying the lease. So you're going to get to the lease, you're going to look around, decide what would be the best place to park on the lease. Who's going to spray which half of the lease? Kind of, are you going to walk to the berm and start spraying from the berm up to the entrance? Or are you going to spray the equipment first? This is a plan that you will make ahead of time before you actually start spraying. So once you've worked with a partner for a little bit of time, you guys are a bit more familiar with each other, then you're going to have your routine that you kind of do on a lease-to-lease basis. So you'll both pull up to a lease, you know exactly what you're going to do, you'll hop out, and you'll be super efficient with it. We have the risk rating for the task as a 63, so that's a bit more on the low end. Now it talks about the potential hazards. So at the very top, we have the potential hazards, and down here, it kind of goes into a bit more detail on it. So what are the hazards, and what is a way that we can eliminate or mitigate these hazards? So miscommunication may result in an ineffective plan or increased probability and severity of other portions of the task. So if you're working with somebody and you're not communicating, you don't tell them, hey, I'm going to go over here, I'm going to spray around the equipment. And then they don't see you spray around the equipment, and they have the same thought of, okay, I'm going to go over there and spray the equipment. Now you've sprayed around the equipment twice, so you've double applied. We've lost money on the herbicide used. It's taken you more time to spray the lease. It's not a very effective plan to have. So miscommunication is a big one. What are the actions that we can use to eliminate or control this hazard? Talk to your partner, especially during spraying. Let them know which areas you've done or haven't done yet. Refer to herbicide label to see which PPE to use. So if you see your partner spraying an area you've already sprayed, pipe up, hey, I already sprayed that area, like we're good to go over there. And check the label on the herbicide products you are using. See what it says for PPE required. Your manager will let you know ahead of time, being, hey, you need your coveralls, you need your hard hat, you need chemical resistant gloves. If you're using a specific chemical that does require a half mask, they will notify you of that. But it's always good on your own part to check the label and just verify that you are using the appropriate PPE required. So this is all for task 1, spraying plan, just what you're going to do to plan before you begin spraying. Now we have task number 2, equipment startup. So these are all the hazards that are associated with task number 2. So pressurized equipment, you have pressurized lines on the back of the truck. Chemicals, you have chemicals and herbicides that are flowing through these lines. Uneven walking surface. Depending on where your truck's parked, or you're going to be hopping out of your truck and back into your truck and walking around your truck. Pinch points. There's going to be pinch points on your truck if you're unreeling your hose or reeling your hose back in. So then we scroll down a bit further and we get to the steps involved in this task. So if you look at this form here, this task, it looks exactly the same as the first task. So every task will look the same. It has your hazards, and then it'll have your steps involved in the task. It'll have potential accidents or hazards, and then a way to eliminate those hazards. So the steps involved in the equipment startup would be: check that the tank has the proper herbicide for your application mixed. Adjust the valves manifold on the truck to the desired position. Now we have your Honda motor on the back of the truck. Use the electrical start if equipped. If electrical start not equipped, use the recoil rope to start it. Depending on throttle level on the pump, use hearing protection if necessary until a safe distance away from the pump. Each pump operates differently. Refer to the manufacturer's guidelines. Set pressure valve to the PSI you require depending on the wind. So if it's a windy day, you might turn the pressure down really low. If it's a nice day, there's not much of a breeze, then you can turn the pressure up a bit higher. These are all things that your manager or supervisor will go over with you and kind of show you a bit more in depth. And hose reel. Grab the gun on the hose reel and unwind the desired amount of hose. So again, it's just a step-by-step. Once you have made your spraying plan, what do you do next? You get out of your truck, you make sure that you're mixing the right herbicides, you start up your pump, and grab your hose and start unreeling it to spray the lease. Different accidents or hazards would be chemical exposure from improper valve settings causing an overpressured line, slips, trips, and falls from walking or hose entanglement. So if you start up the pump and maybe your valves are closed, the water now inside your lines have nowhere to go, and you might blow a line, and this is going to shoot herbicide and water everywhere. So this is one of those things that before you turn the pump on, you do a quick check, make sure all your valves are in the right position, and then start your pump up. Actions to eliminate or control these hazards. Use the pre-trip inspection document to ensure all handspring equipment is in working condition. Do not attempt to use defective equipment. Refer to label of herbicide to be sure you're using the proper PPE. Watch your step when walking. Don't walk on ground if it looks to be hazardous. So for slips, trips, and falls, just always be aware of where you are in the lease. Some leases are going to have maybe bigger rocks, or they might be muddy and wet. So just something to think about ahead of time. When you pull up on the lease and you're making your spray plan, look around the lease, look where your hazards are going to be, and just make your plan accordingly. So task number 3, spraying pattern. So again, here's your hazards for your spraying pattern. So you have miscommunication, you have fatigue and frustration, environmental because of your spray drift if it's windy outside, herbicide exposure, maybe you're not using the proper PPE, weather, lightning, rain, wind. These are all hazards that you could face depending on what the weather conditions are, maybe who your partner is, what the leases look like that day. Steps involved in this task. Always keep your spraying pattern uniform, square, and straight. The outside edge is the most important area to spray. When you're walking along the berm, for example, you're going to have the lease on one side and you're going to have a crop on the other side. So that outside edge is super important because if you spray too far, you're going to damage the crop. So you kind of want to keep a nice straight line there. Use the spray gun to administer the spray pattern. Avoid application through excessive overlap. Adjust pressure up on pump depending on wind conditions. If you haven't started spraying yet, a lot of this might seem foreign. It's a good idea once you get out in the field and you've sprayed for a few days to open this JHA, just kind of review it. There might be some information in here that you're not aware about. One of those being avoid over application through excessive overlap. So when you are spraying on an oil lease, you're going to be moving your spray gun from side to side, covering the ground with your herbicide application. And you want to overlap a little bit just so that you know everything is fully covered. If you start overlapping a lot, then you're going to be double applying and wasting herbicides when you don't need to be. Potential accidents or hazards, environmental damage caused by improper application and pattern. So if you're spraying too much herbicides, if it's windy out and you're drifting off of the targeted site that you're trying to cover, these are all hazards. Action to eliminate or control. Proper training is important to ensure employees are competent in their application, and always monitor the weather. If the wind is too strong, shut down and don't spray. So the training is a huge one here. We are going to be out in the field with you guys every day for a while, making sure everyone's comfortable, everyone has a good spray pattern, you're not drifting with the wind, you're not over applying or overlapping too much. But then it's always on you guys to monitor the weather. We aren't going to be out in the field with you guys every day during the summer. So if it starts getting windy out and you notice you're drifting a bit, notify your supervisor or your manager, and they will tell you either to maybe switch to an area with more trees so you're a bit more protected from the wind, or they might tell you to shut down for the day because the wind might just get worse. Task 4, equipment shutdown. So far we've gone through, once you pull up to the lease, how do you plan accordingly for what your task is going to be? We've gone through getting out of your truck and starting up the equipment, and we've gone through, once the equipment is started up, how you're going to spray the lease, what your spray pattern is going to be for the lease. So once you've done all that, you finish spraying, now we're on to equipment shutdown. So again, you're working around the equipment, you're working around pressurized hose lines, and you have the potential for uncontrolled release of herbicides if maybe the lines are too overpressured and one of them blows. Steps involved in this task would be, when completed spraying operation, come back to truck and turn the pressure valve off, turn the Honda motor to the off position, turn valves off on the valve manifold, wind the hose reel up and put in the lock position, and store the gun in designated position on the truck. So you finish spraying the lease, you get back to the truck, you shut down all the equipment on the back, you make sure your valves are turned to the off position. Accidents or hazards that are associated with this could be potential equipment damage resulting in possible chemical exposure or environmental damage. So again, having an overpressurized line and having it blow up on the back of the truck. To eliminate this or control this, do an inspection of equipment before getting back into your truck. Make sure that all valves are properly turned off. So don't just, turn off your pump and the valves and walk around and hop back in your truck. Make sure to do a quick look, turn off your pump, your valves, look at your valve, follow the hose. The hose will go from the valve to one of the hose reels. Make sure that you've turned off the proper valves. And once you've done that, you're pretty much done your lease, right? You finished spraying, you've turned off your equipment, you shut the valves, you've gotten back in your truck. You're going to be filling out your paperwork on your tablet for the lease, and you're going to be driving on to the next lease after that one. So this JHA is a quick rundown, a kind of step-by-step for each task of how to do this procedure safely and effectively. Again, we'll be going over a lot of this in class at the start of the summer. And we'll also be going over it a lot out in the field. So we'll be with you guys out in the field demonstrating how to properly do everything. If you have any questions, ask us. But there's a lot of stuff on this form that might get lost in translation. Or if we explain something to you and you don't fully understand exactly what we mean, then this is a form that you're able to go onto Dropbox and reference it. Just for a bit of additional information regarding the tasks that you are performing.